All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming and joining us this morning for the Warrant Officer Technical Panel. Before we get started, there's going to be a couple rules of engagement. First, I'll introduce the panelists, and then I'll ask, they'll talk about what's on their hearts and minds for a few minutes, and then we'll get into some questions where one or all of them can go ahead and answer the questions. To start off with, my name is David Lucy. I'm the R-Cyber CCWO. I'm your moderator. We probably should have gotten somebody who could spell data to be your moderator, but that's okay. We'll make do with what we've got. This entire panel is all about data. Our technical experts here are CW5 McDougall Matt, Forscom G6 STA, CW5 Fernandez Urme, CPB CCWO, CW5 Travis Sheeson, CCOE STA, CW4 Stuart Jabbar, PEO STA, and CW2 David Hafecker, EW Tech to Joint Counter UAS Office. All right. The Army must achieve data superiority in all areas of information and cyber warfare to gain dominance over our adversaries. The Army's technical leaders, the warrant officers, must lead the way in adapting innovative ways to gain data superiority. And that's what all these gentlemen are going to be talking about today. First, let's go ahead and let them talk about what's on their hearts and minds. Chief Urme, will you start, please?
Yes, good morning. So first, let me thank the panel members for the opportunity to participate in this discussion. So today I want to talk about the critical role of data in defensive cyber operations and how we have reshaped and evolved our approach to it. For years, our analysts faced a foundational challenge. They were trained to hunt threats, but spent much of their time wrangling data. In the beginning, our analysts manually pulled logs, normalized and carved through data to get down to the required fields and the information they needed to perform behavioral analytics. This took time away from the hunt and allowed additional time for the adversary to operate unseen. To solve this, we changed our approach. We created a dedicated team of data engineers and codified the work role KSAs requirements in joint standards and the DCWF. These are not analysts. They are specialized individuals focused on one thing, getting data from the sensor to the analyst. That is getting data from the sensor to shooters. They build our pipelines, extract, transfer, and load, clean, correlated, but most importantly, provide actionable data for our operators. They are enablers and force multipliers. Once again, I want to thank the panel members for this opportunity to be part of this discussion. And I'll be followed by Chief McDougall.
Oh, thanks. One, thank you to everybody, just like you said, for being here. It's an honor to be able to sit up here and talk about a topic I'm sure everyone's really interested in. So my kind of standpoint, sitting from Forscom and being part of the Transform and Contact effort that's been going on across the Army for the last 2 years and will continue on into Next Gen C2, we've had a lot of observations on how right now commanders want to visualize the information that's out there. So with that, it's requiring our soldiers, warrant officers, those coming out of the Army Software Factory, how are they actually curating data now to provide that visualization for commanders on various different platforms that's out there. And just like Urme said, like you look at now the sensors that are across the entire battlefield of things that are being injected into our networks, it's understanding those data formats and how we're curating that data in order to provide that information for commanders, because the amount of sensors that we're now propagating across the Army is never gonna, it's growing infinitely right now actually, because we went from, maybe a UAS would be assigned to a brigade, for whatever mission, but now they're getting organic capabilities for small UASs, like over 100 per brigade right now. So as part of this effort, it's like, hey, how do we change now the KSAs that are required of our warrants as they're coming through, their basic courses, like what additional training do they need so they understand this, everything from, hey, this is how different data sets are out there, but also about how to now articulate that in ways that commanders can understand.
Yeah, that's a great lead into some thoughts that I have. So whenever I think about data, I think about cognitive overload and how we can quickly become overwhelmed with too much information, right? So if we think about like a good analogy that I put in my head is we sent people to the moon back in the 60s with less power than it took, like what we see in a Raspberry Pi or a cell phone today. those transport layers taking data to and from the spacecraft as far as like comms and control systems and whatnot, very limited. So when we start looking at data in the EMS from an EW perspective, you can rapidly overwhelm a system with way too much information, right? So whenever I think of it, we got to figure out how to pare down how much we're looking at down to what's essential for targeting, force protection, future planning, those type of things. So we're not overloading our systems and our people with information.
So I guess that leads into what my perspective of data, being from the program office, is we're not specifically changing the data that we're pulling in. We're just we maybe just moving it different or moving the amount of data more. But specifically, we have to understand what type of data is needed. So as warrant officers, we go into this new data literacy training that we're getting, we have to be able to ask those smart questions, those specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound questions. That will get us to the right type of data that the commander needs to make decisions. We have to be able to make sure those data systems or those systems that we're using that's pulling these data are also integrated. So that's all I got on that.
And then from my perspective, while I am at the Joint Counter UAS office, just to be upfront with everyone, I was there for a total of 96 hours before coming here for WOAC. So my perspective will be from doing TIC in 1st Mobile Brigade Combat Team 101st for the last 2 years, really focused on the tactical fight and how as more and more sensors are being put at the tactical edge, to some of the discussions that were said before of data overload, what specific S shops within the brigade headquarters receive what data, how do we parse that data out to our representatives, from an EW perspective, what does the 6 need to know, what does the 2 need to know, what does fires need to know, and how can I correlate that data to the correct end user? But more importantly, the ability to communicate that data that we're receiving in a way that the maneuver commander understands is the most important aspect to me.
Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, chiefs, this is for one or all of you. Every platform, system, communication, action, sensor, report, transmission by the U.S. military or its adversaries produces some kind of data. What KSAs would be essential for a warrant officer to effectively manage and organize that data, ensuring its quality, accessibility, and security before any analysis can even begin?
All right, sure, I'll take it. All right, so first I want to say, so we're talking about before analysis can even begin, right? And one thing is, number one, we're integrators, right? Warrant officers, that is a key attribute that we normally do have, is that we bring that piece of integration. So in this realm, the warrant must understand the full data lifecycle, how data is generated, how to extract it, how to transmit it securely, how to transform it, load it, and store it, and make it available so that it is actionable by these analysts. For data engineers within DCO, when it comes to managing and organizing data, they bend these into feeds, fields, and flows. Warrant officers need to couple their domain knowledge, and that's one thing that I think we need to have a discussion on, right, as far as multiple data operations, data engineers. However, we'll talk about that they need to couple their domain knowledge with the available feeds, fields, and flows required by their analysts. In our case, not only our cyber defense analysts, but our analytics support officers to conduct behavior analytics. They must ensure that what comes in is clean, secure, mission ready, because bad data leads to bad decisions. This requires specific skills in scripting, understanding regular expressions, Logstash, ETL tools like Apache, NiFi, Kafka, APIs, or even publish and subscribe servers, along with, obviously, database structures, programming languages, and scripting language. So essentially, an integrator that is able to put those pieces together and ensure the data can go from sensor to shooter.
Now, was great points. Kind of looking at some of the high technical tools that people are going to have to understand, it's like basic software design, everything from like data structures, formats, understanding the difference between formats, schemas, ontologies, how all data, is related to each other. You look at programming languages, just like you already said, database design. There's going to be different data sets used at different echelons across the entire scheme, the entire stack of our warfighting functions that are out there. Understanding API design. I know a lot of people say like, well, we just need a standard API. Well, if you look across industry, no one has a standard API. That's not a thing. There's just like, hey, this is how I serve up my data. This is how you can interpret my data. Understanding the, systems thinking, understanding the full system of like, hey, from source to actually, producing for the commander, understanding how that data flows through that entire ecosystem. So you understand where to put it in various message brokers. So if we're going across, from different message formats, different schemas that are out there, because if you look at the multiple formats we have out there, you have, one will have like lat long, others will have like latitude, longitude, or even just a number, or you'll have like some message formats that are coming across in 2525 Bravo or 2525 Delta, which, those in the room that don't know the difference between those two, the variables that are in there, it goes from like a 15-digit alphanumeric variable to a 25-digit numeric variable. So whatever system's receiving it has to understand how to read it. So understanding those complexities across the entire stack is important. And that comes with time too. That's not something you could just like do in a 6-month class, but it's understanding, hey, these are some of the things you need to concentrate on. Also understanding just a basic understanding of the warfighting systems that you're employing. As we go from our legacy systems into the next gen C2, understanding how those systems interoperate with each other and how they interpret that data, but understanding that warfighting system as a whole. It's kind of hard sometimes on the signal side. If we go to a signal battalion or we go to a signal organization, we're managing transport. You go to a fires organization, you at least understand all those fires, platforms that are in that formation, how they interpret that data. You go to ADA unit, same type thing. Go, down to an MBCT, you're going to see the full gamut across all warfighting functions for a brigade. So it's just having that basic understanding of those tools so you know how those are actually employed.
Yeah, I think you bring up some very good points. One of the challenges, of course, when we start talking about data is classification-wise, specifically what's SBUE, what's secret, what can and can't be shared with partners, and establishing those data flows to and from partners. The main idea is to increase lethality so that we can get targeting, force protection, those type of things in place so that at the end of the day, we're faster in decision-making and action on the battlefield.
I think one of the things from the EW side is just understanding the different, similar to what was said earlier, understanding the different frameworks where your data is going to be transferred. On the EW side, we have things like CFE, ISA, and 4.2. It's the different types of formats that we have to pull together to get to a common picture.
I think at my level, a lot of things that I would have talked about have been covered already, but I look at it from the KSA aspect of knowledge, know the system. I've heard a lot of warrants over the last week talk about lifelong learning, and I absolutely agree with that, but I'm a bottom line upfront type person. It's more of a know your job and do your job. You are the technical expert. You are expected to know the equipment. You are expected to know how to implement it, how to work with those NCOs to train the soldiers to know how to use the systems and how to push the data to the correct formats. Skills, keeping everything organized. It is a skill to keep things organized, knowing how to store it, knowing the classification that things need to be at, knowing who the data needs to get parsed out to in an organized manner across multiple network schemes. And then ability, knowing your audience. Speaking to people, in my opinion, is a very important ability. And again, communicating things in a manner like here at TechNet, we're all technical professionals. I can cover more technical data when it comes to the things that we're talking about. At the BCT level, I'm talking to maneuver commanders, infantry captains. I'm speaking maneuver. How does this get after your objectives? How do I meet things on the HPTL? How do I relate it to the mission itself? Wave top it, probably not super data centric when it comes to speaking to leaders.
Being able to communicate. Okay, got to work on that one. All right. Okay, branching off what several of you mentioned, knowing the equipment and being able to be an expert of the equipment. But branching off of that, given the very technical backgrounds and MOS specialties within the warrant officer cohort, what criteria and process would you recommend for determining which warrant officer is best suited to lead or contribute to a specific data analysis?
All right, so this is an interesting question for me. And I'll say because traditionally, I tend to lean towards saying that we should have one MOS that takes care of the data, regardless of domain or function that data is supporting. So at the end of the day, it's data pipelines, and it's just getting the data requirements, regardless of the data types that may be traversing these pipelines. However, due to the nuances between warfighting functions and domains, there may be a case to have champions or work roles that specialize in a specific data set per warfighting function or domain, if you will. These individuals need to understand the mission relevance of the data they're responsible for. They need the ability to translate data into a mission impact. There is a case for pairing these individuals with an analyst within the appropriate domain or knowledge or warfighting function, where the data analyst performs a logistics function of providing data required to the warfighter. An example in defensive cyber operations, our analytic support officers identify the feeds and fields required to perform analysis. Our data engineers work to procure these feeds and fields and develop the flows to mitigate the gaps identified by the ASOs.
So kind of my thoughts on this is that it's going to vary based on the data analysis that's based on, what's required for the desired outcomes. Like all warrant officers across the cohort are going to have different viewpoints. You go to our fires, our ADA, they all have different outcomes because they understand the importance of what data they're using. They're looking for what important data is out there. So you look at like you're going to be performing like battle analysis for battle damage assessment, target designation, battlefield modeling. It's going to be what's important to those analysts is going to be making sure they have the right tools available for what they need. One of the examples we had was during actually your last rotation, Dave, when you're on 101st, what the ASF was doing out there to build for your brigade commander, that data set. It was like the commander wanted to have a very specific view within Maven, what he wanted to see. So Software Factory, churned on numbers in different data sets, for, about a week to provide the output of what it looked like for that commander. So it's going to vary based on which warfighting function we're talking about, because it would be great to say, like, we just need one MOS to do this. No, it's a kind of a shared, skill task that needs to be shared across the Army. And we're starting to get there. Right now, if you go out to, the fires community, they're right now becoming very smart in the type of data that they're managing and understanding it down to the level. So.
Yeah, not really too much to add to that. You guys covered it really well. The first word I had on my notes was depends, right? Depends on if you're talking about big data across the entire enterprise. That may require a special MOS to handle all that from a larger perspective. But then as Matt and Yerme highlighted, as you get down into the for eaches for specialization, my data as a EW person is specific to what I need to be able to visualize and relate to the commander. People in the MI community have different things, fires, whatnot. So it's probably better to have like a big platform-centric type person, and then for eaches where we get specialized training on like what is it that we actually need to accomplish with the analytics and outputs for the data that we're looking at.
Yeah, I'm just going to beat the drum, say the same thing, right? When you ask a question like that, you have to think about data as everybody's using data. Whether you're EW cyber guy, you're a maintenance technician, or you're a geospace technician, everybody's using a particular data set. So understanding how to analyze the specific data that you are using, what type of changes that needs to be made, how you're going to present that specific data, where you're going to move that data. I don't think we should be looking at specifically one MOS. I mean, there is one MOS at the time where it was 355 Alphas. They moved from information service technician to data operations because they are the ones who are like overall looking at big data and how the Army is going to, I guess, store and move data in the at the actual unit. But when it comes to data for a particular MOS, I'm going to understand what type of data the commander needs from me. He's going to understand what type of data is needed for him, and we'll figure out how we merge that data to present the best picture.
I don't really have anything else to add on to the data. I will say, though, that I am not at the level to make a decision on whether or not there should be an MOS created for this, but I will say that collaboration is key when it comes to where this data is going. Before every battle rhythm event, at least when I was in 1st Brigade, the warrants would all come together, didn't matter what MOS we were, and we would sync on everything that was happening so we could go to our respective warfighting functions and keep the fight going. Whether that's fires needing information from me as to what radar signals we're seeing out there. Is there any counter fire that's happening? Intel, hey, what are your guys seeing on the battlefield? What type of frequencies are you looking at? So we can work with SIGINT as to what priorities we need to be focused on. And then getting that everything else back from those people as well as to what the focus of EW needed to be for the fight. So collaboration is key. And I think that when it comes to the data, it's very centric on warfighting function. Every warfighting function has specific data, but there always needs to be collaboration because teamwork makes the dream work.
Okay, thanks. I'm definitely taking notes on all this. So go find warrant officer smarter than me. Got it. Okay. All right. I'll jump down to combining different warrant officers in a minute. But first, since you talked about not knowing whether or not to speak to a different MOS, knowing what you know, what training has your branch unit or MOS implemented in order to train those skills and abilities you've talked about?
I guess I'll jump on this one. There's been a lot of training, especially with TIC 1.0. A lot of it was last minute fire from the hip, especially going to JRTC and receiving about 1,000 pieces of new equipment during RSO&I. Thank you. The notes I really have for this was go new if it's major. If this is an enduring thing, if the data is something that's not specific to any MOS, but it is data that is going to be enduring for a long period of time, maybe there needs to be a new MOS for it because it doesn't fit into any of the boxes that we already have. Adjust if it's close. If the data is close to MOSs that already exist and the data that they're handling, adjust those MOSs to fit that data into their boxes, and then team up if it's shared. Bring together the cohort from multiple other MOSs, put whichever MOS the data closely or as close as possible relates to be the team lead, and have a collaboration of all those subject matter experts to work at the data problem.
So just to expand on the MOS piece a little bit, as a politician, sometimes you answer questions the way you want to answer them and not directly what the question was asked. But, I've held 3 different warrant officer MOSs, 1 per decade, it seems like, so you can do the math there. But as a 352 Sierra signals analyst, I was looking at, raw IQ files, trying to get information out of different emitters, pulling that out for content, push that into databases. That was the form of data that I was looking at that time. As a 170 Alpha, I did that for a little while. Very interested in metadata applications and data that highlighted vulnerabilities in a system that could be exploited or vulnerabilities that had to be defended. And then as a 170 Bravo, I'm also interested in IQ type files, but from a little bit different perspective. What threat systems are out there in the environment that I need to be concerned with? How do they function? Not just from, hey, this thing has a weapon system on it that can kill you, but how does that system work internally from a signal standpoint, signal structure? Not necessarily to exploit the content out of it, but how can I affect that thing with low amounts of power at the protocol level, so I can have a greater effect and make it a little bit more difficult to figure out what I'm doing with a broader, sorry to repeat myself, but for a broader effect that kind of coincides with what the maneuver force is doing.
Thanks, that's a great point. As I kind of mentioned earlier, some of the different KSAs that we need to employ, but some of the stuff that's being taught now, I will say, signals catching up. Not going to call it Chris, but I know like there is there's efforts afoot right now for leaning into how next gen T2 is going to affect the Army. What kind of skills need to be available for our or be ingrained in our signal warrant officers, in order to help facilitate that for the Army. I will say, there's some basic underlying foundational skills that are being taught, everything from like Linux, database design, those kind of things were always there, just not really showing the actual how this is employed, it was kind of like one of the steps I was missing back when I went through school, 20 years ago, or at least the basic course here 20 years ago. I will say like some of the other gaps though that we are missing as part of our training is how these applications and these tools apply to different warfighting systems that are out there. It's understanding, how the Army armies, like, hey, this is like the different warfighting functions that are out there. This is a fire system. This is sustainment systems. This is how everything ties together. Because eventually, we all talk about wanting to get to a common COP, for the commander. It's like, well, at different echelons, the COP changes a little bit. But understanding that data flow for whatever warfighting function is out there, how it aggregates is what's going to make us successful. Because we have to understand that entire system of systems across the board. So that's all I got on that one.
All right, so from my perspective, when it comes to defensive cyber operations, so number one, the core to threat hunting for us is data analysis. So we need data to be able to conduct operations. Without data, we're blind. There's nothing that we can do. To work on these skills, what we've implemented we've adopted the gunnery training models that are used by maneuver units. We've got a process of gunnery tables 1 through 4 that are individual focused hunt and data analysis at the individual level. Then we move into collective series from gunnery table 5 essentially all the way to 12, where we build through the crew, mission element teams, and collective training all the way up to the battalion and the brigades. We leverage the persistent cyber training environment not only for the gunnery tables, but essentially as our range complex, so that our individuals can go in there and train every day as close to real world as we can within the environment. So we look at our KSAs. We've developed specialized structured content plans within PCTE so that our individuals can further refine their JQR requirements and their joint cyber training and certification standards that we must meet. So that's how we're getting after that training.
Awesome. Give me just a sec. Amazon book list, big data for dummies. Got it. Okay. All right, gentlemen. Data analysis often requires integrating data from multiple sources and systems. How can we best leverage the unique inter-branch relationships and established communications channels within the Warrant Officer Corps to facilitate cross-functional data analysis projects involving multiple MOSs and systems?
I think if you want to, build that cross-functional team, you need to get the warrant officers together early, facilitate that early cross-functional data analysis. We got to ensure the key warrants are at the right locations. Specifically, like we have myself at the program office. I'm trying to ensure that I'm talking to the other warrant officers at the PEOs or at the ACMs to ensure that we are starting early in the process to make sure that we're connecting the dots with whatever type of architectures that are being designed, and we're making sure we can transfer data. So getting early on in the process before those projects are actually started to make sure that those connections happen. We energize the WONET, make sure we have connections down at the divisions and the corps, getting the input back from them up into the projects to make sure we make the links.
So I think we keep on talking about data, but at the core of this whole thing is data centricity, that sharing of information across the different warfighting functions. it's been brought up a couple times is, establish standards, but then we also have to figure out a way to enforce those standards. Right now, they're like, it's been highlighted, there's a plethora of different standards that are out there. In cases where we can do translations, sometimes that's okay, but if we're talking about speed, sometimes those translations are going to slow us down probably just enough to make us ineffective, right? So we got to make sure that we're recognizing when translations need to occur, and then recognizing where that direct line into a decision point is the speed that we need to stay ahead of the adversary.
Those are all great points. I mean, for me, it's summing it up to developing a shared understanding across the echelon or organization you're in. One great aspect is that warrant officers tend to gravitate towards each other in the operational tactical force or any unit we're in, because depending on the organization you're in, there's very few of us. So I know when I went to my first assignment, I was the lone signal warrant, and there was, in that Ranger battalion, there was like 3 others that were there. They didn't understand what signal was, but they can at least mentor me like how to become that officership piece, but understanding their functions as well is the key part that develops as part of those relationships. So I just encourage those that are coming up, whatever unit you're a part of, make sure you're reaching out to those other warrant officers to learn as much as you can about their organization, whether that's sustainment, understanding how their like different systems all talk to each other and what roles they provide, whether it's fires, whether it's intel, understanding how all these systems integrate with each other. Because at the end of the day, whatever organization you're going to be assigned to, like your job is there to help facilitate that commander to fill that part of the puzzle that is the greater army. But understanding their systems and what you bring to the table, it makes sure you've got to come outside from, whatever server stack or whatever outer stack, back J&N room, whatever. Like you need to come out of that environment and actually get out and be involved in your organization to understand what the rules and requirements are. That's all I got.
Yeah, not much really to follow with that, right? But I mean, I said it earlier about integrators, warrants are integrators. What are we commonly known for, right? Our strength of our network, right? The ability to be able to just pick up the phone, call a warrant officer regardless of echelon, regardless of service. Now that the Air Force has warrants as well, right? We can just pick up the phone and say, hey, we're having these challenges. How do we work together? Let's get through these issues, right? So that is, I think, where our strength is, our ability to be able to branch out and communicate and get through these challenges together.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight one other thing as I was listening to people talk is one thing that we probably need to take a look at too is how much compute store is needed on the front end to do certain things. We're going to be in expeditionary environments where you may be in a situation where you may not have, the comm systems that you need to, or the links that you need to have that back end cloud support or a big server stack in the back end to get after things. So understanding the compute store piece, that links back to the first comment that I made, like what's actually important for decision-making, targeting, keeping our folks alive and actually getting after targeting the enemy. And I think that's where our warrant officer population time now really through next-gen C2 processes and other things going on. But then also at the point of need where we're in an environment, hey, what is the actual data that you need? What's the timeliness on that? And what happens if we don't have comms with you? How are you going to proceed forward? Those are important things to look at.
Okay, gentlemen, I've got a few more questions for you, but to ensure that we get to the audience as well, I'm going to jump to them right now.
You talked much about the knowledge and skills that required from warrant officers. Can we talk more about the attributes that allowed you to get to the positions that you are at and able to make advice or give advice at the strategic level?
Yeah, so I'm not necessarily the perfect model to model your life after, but I think one of the key aspects of success is curiosity, a willingness to study, and then there's also like a tempering with persistence, right? So if you recognize something that is important, it'll have a big impact on things. Not everybody's necessarily going to see that, but if you put in the work to understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish and then drive towards that, I think that's an important piece. How does that relate to data? You may recognize the fact that you don't need 1,000 fields to get something done. You may recognize that, hey, current classification processes are putting us outside the game of sharing information at speed with partners and allies. Why is that important? Because we need to be at the front edge of targeting, getting after the adversary, and not worrying about, oh, I put this extra little piece of information on here. I went from SBUE to secret, no foreign at that, so now I can't even share it across the CDS. So studying things, everything from classification guidance to what's being done in industry, what are the important elements of targeting, what kind of fidelity do we need to have on something for a particular target, and then persistence to keep on driving after that.
So kind of piggyback on all that, because you're absolutely right. Like, those are all key attributes. I've looked at it from the sense of, it's experience and also continuous learning. Because I advise like Brendan Warrants when they come in, it's like, this is a hobby now. If you're not going home and nerding out and figuring this out, you're not going to be given all the tools when you come to the schoolhouse. You're not going to be taught everything. You have to continuously learn. The second you don't, new technology is going to roll out. There's one book I read, I can't remember what it was from, but it talked about the half-life in IT of knowledge, if you left it, would be about, 6 months. If you left the command for 6 months, half of what was relevant 6 months ago is still relevant today, depending on, that can vary. But if you think about it, you have to stay abreast of technology as it changes all the time. I would say what's enabled a lot of us to be up at the positions we have right now and be as effective and involved in the rest of the Army is our experiences too. So, if you have a varied experience, you can now leverage that when you get to this level, when you're articulating to senior leaders at the 4-star level what they need to hear based on their problem sets, because you now have a wide breadth of what you can offer to that commander. It's just not single focused. So as W5s or as even 4s and 5s, you need to be able to speak to the lowest private all the way to the highest 4-star general. You need to be able to communicate in their language. And the technical bell curve really goes really high at that point. For the middle part where you're talking to the mid-level warrants, it's the NCOs that are actually maintaining the equipment, and then it goes to more analogous when you get to the senior leader and also down to the private level. So it's having those experiences that you can now articulate and provide those analogies to those commanders. One of the things I would also brief is, even though it's not required for us to have, civilian education certifications, great. All those are part of what make you you. But pursuing civilian education teaches you how to learn more effectively. So as you become, more senior warrant officer and you're sitting at these more, strategic positions, your span to learn something new and research something new for commanders is very short. You'll come in, there'll be a new problem every day when you come in the room. You better have an answer by the end of the day. It varies at times. So it's having those skills, understanding how to, write papers very quickly, how to articulate it appropriately to commanders is very important.
So, of course, agree with all that, and of course, I'm not to that level yet, but I'll give you a couple of tidbits from my perspective. Adaptability, technical knowledge, problem solving. And one thing that, if I could say, is getting out of your comfort zone. As you probably all are sitting here, you're probably like, this guy does not like to talk in front of a room of people. No, I don't. I can't stand it. I'm sitting over here, I'm shaking like a leaf. But you get outside your out of your comfort zone to improve yourself. Always look to improve yourself, whether it's your technical skill, your knowledge, communication. Look to improve yourself. Continuous improvement is going to be key.
Yeah, you just took all my notes, so that's awesome, right? But with that, I do want to say, so obviously, everyone needs to be a problem solver. So how do we differentiate ourselves from that, right? And bottom line, we have to be the subject matter experts in our domain and in our portfolio. However, right, to be that in this ever-changing domain, you have to be a continuous learner. You have to get after that. You also have to challenge yourself when those opportunities arise to understanding that it's going to be uncomfortable, take those challenges, because that is how you grow and how you learn. If it's comfortable and you love what you're doing, which is great, it's awesome that you love what you're doing, but are you really growing? Are you really achieving an evolution that is going to get you to your end state and your end goal, right? You're only going to get that through those challenging assignments, those challenging locations that you need to move towards.
So Go ahead, Dave.
I don't think that question was for me, but I'll answer. No. At my level, while I'm not at the level of everyone else on the panel, I will say my experience as a warrant officer, one of the biggest things that I learned was how to communicate with people, not just like, oh, very technical based or very maneuver based, but how does this person ingest data, or how do they receive the message? I know it's cliche to say, but the Army is a people organization. It's made up entirely of people. You have equipment, but it's operated by people, even the unmanned ones. So understanding how to communicate to people and take whatever message or data or equipment or capability or means to an ends that you need to give to that person, understanding how to communicate and network with them. When I first got to 101st, I had no EW equipment. So besides focusing on writing all the SOPs that didn't exist, one of the biggest things that I spent doing my first 2 months there was literally taking a day or two out of the week to go around and talk to every S shop because I networked with them. And by the time I actually got to where I had equipment, borrowing from other units, they already knew what my roles and responsibilities were, what my capabilities and my limitations were. I understood what their roles and responsibilities and capabilities and limitations were, and how we were able to integrate with integrate with each other because I had done that networking already. People, that's the biggest thing, the ability to network and communicate with people from my perspective.
So what I'm hearing y'all saying is for dinosaurs like me, it's time to head to Fort Living Room, right? Okay. Who else?
Warrant Officer One Housel, just had a question for any of the members of the board. As our adversaries in a LISCO environment have more and more capabilities to force us to fight in a data-degraded environment, what redundancies are the BCTs and divisions creating to help us kind of win the fight still when we don't have access to all these data sensors or stuff along those lines that allows us to win the fight as we have now?
Yeah, so I think that links back to my previous input as far as better understanding the compute and storage needed at the front edge. When we talk about data, even at the front edge, if you have a sensor associated with you, you can easily become overwhelmed with the amount of information coming off that thing. So we need to take a look at the AI ML modeling that could potentially narrow down data from vast amounts to very specific things that we're looking for, and then be able to operate in an environment where comms may or may not exist with a back-end system.
So it is a balance as well. So you think about across the entire PACE plan, it's an E for a reason. It's not meant to have everything at every level of that. You go out to a brigade, you still had a map with acetate on the wall just in case. Every brigade operates that way because, hey, Murphy's going to come out and something's going to happen. That doesn't mean you don't keep pushing efforts, with modernizing new technology, but it is ensuring that you have multiple efforts to do certain things. But it also talks about hey, I know I'm going to be limited in certain DDIL environments to where I'm fighting now to get back to the P and the A. It's not, I'm staying at C. Everyone talks about, in the past, I've heard the term oh, we need 72 hours worth of data. What does that even mean? When you really think about it, it's about, hey, as a brigade goes out, they're not going to continue fighting on beyond what their last order was. They're literally going to fight back to get back into a P or higher, communication anyways. That's really the reality there, because if you don't, that brigade's not going to just cowboy up and keep moving forward because they may have fratricide on another brigade that's out there. So it's just important to realize it's okay triaging what we need, and it's kind of a balancing act right now. So what we've done in the past with part of Signal is, we provide the network, we provide compute based on what we think we need out there. But it is that until we put it under load at CTC rotations or, warfighting exercises, we start seeing what's that right balance of what we need. So part of the Army right now is part of Transform Contact, and then moving into Next Gen C2, it is that now putting a load by all the warfighting systems on our architectures to and then being flexible enough to realize, okay, we are a little bit wrong here, let's adjust fire, instead of going, hey, we're going to buy this kit, sorry, that's what you get for the next 10 years. So that's part of where the Army is moving towards on that effort.
And I think it's also important to, consider, you mentioned 96 hours, right?
Sorry.
Or- Maybe it was 96 in my head. But the point I'm trying to make is, how long is a mission? How long is data relevant for in an operation? From an EW perspective, we had some arbitrary timelines set against data that we would capture with our EW systems, anywhere from 24 to 48, 72, 96, all arbitrary numbers put out there that were in fact not real numbers by any means. Operationally relevant has a variation of meaning to it. The pieces that I try to pull away from that is the here and now, the immediacy that we have with the electromagnetic support portion of our job is probably within that 72-hour window. But we also have a secondary part of that, which includes training and capability development. So as we look at our systems being developed, that immediate piece definitely needs to be a consideration. If we have a system that can potentially do continuous record, maybe we say continuous record maxes out at 12 hours for a particular bandwidth of spectrum, and then it just overwrites at that point. On the side, we also have the ability to pull off individual pieces of data, IQ files, and other associated metadata for the long-term type stuff that may require SIG and exploitation, may require capability development, but then even equally important, how do we get that information into the schoolhouse so people like Bill Howard here can get that to folks like Grant Cornell into the schoolhouse so they can get reps and sets with information that's familiar on the battlefield, right? So whenever I pull up a spectrum analyzer, it's not first heard, first seen whenever out in whatever location I'm at. I should be able to access that information as needed during training exercises and whatnot, so that if I look at the spectrum, I've got a built-in library in my head for auditory visual recognition, and then the analytic process is built into what I do as a data analyst for EW to identify emitters, both from a known perspective and the things that we suspect will be unknown. In a software-defined radio environment, we expect rapid change, things that we're seeing in the Ukraine right now. Changes happen within weeks, not years or decades. It's pretty rapid. So then I got to build my people to have access to data, access to tools and techniques to go after how to identify things quickly, develop capabilities against those things, but also train.
I'm going to go ahead and continue to harp on this, specifically with that question being that a de-dealed environment or a congested and contested environment, understanding and asking those, I said it earlier, if you didn't get a chance to write it down, I'm going to say it again, those SMART questions, right? It's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. You want to understand what type of information that your commander needs at that time. If you're reduced in space and you can't move data, everybody says data. Everybody's talking about data. It's this big encompassing word. What is it that your commander needs to know in that time and space? Understanding that, asking those questions, getting to the specific details of what it is that you need to pull in, and he's required to make a decision is going to be key, specifically in those times when you don't have the connection back, the backhaul to get back to the big data platform or wherever we're going to be pulling the big information from. So ask your commanders those questions. Get that reliable information so you can provide him with what him or her, he or she needs to make a decision.
Yeah, I'll kind of add in there too. So it's understanding that what echelon you're at. So if I was to ask a question back to the group, who in here knows what the planning cycle is for a brigade in a Let's Go fight? Go ahead. What's up? No, not the grade operations. What's normal planning cycle? So brigade is given an order. They're supposed to plan for how far out by doctrine. No, it's 12 to 24 for a brigade in a Let's Go fight. If you go by, what now 72 hours is for other pre-planning and stuff like that. But if you look for a brigade, it's 12 to 24, and then for a battalion, it's less than 12. So it's understanding what missions you're actually planning for a brigade fight. I'll show it to you after this if you want. But it's part of TIC, that was part of the discussion that we were in. It's there's different planning cycles for different echelons. Division obviously goes out further, but a brigade is part of the new 3.0. Yep.
hours would give the brigades up to the 72 hours where we were trying to go get after.
Right now, there's trying to get to, I'm just telling you what's in doctrine today.
Okay, so
Yeah, no, there's desires of, hey, let's try to work on what's realistic, but you look at, when it comes down to, we have to base ourselves in doctrine at times too for what we're trying to get after. So.
that's the question though. Chief Stevenson, so I am not a signaler, so bear with me for this.
But he is a fires expert.
I know one or two things about fires. So I've done a lot of travel lately, and one thing I've noticed that different warfighting functions are becoming more data focused. With that, I know there was a question earlier about who should own the data or who should be kind of governing that data. My question is, what are your thoughts on a cross-functional data-driven team for the next Gen C2 so we can flatten the data ontology and make the data more usable for all warfighting functions?
Can you say that one more time?
Yes.
The cross-functional team, you're talking about C2
Data,
cross-functional team?
yeah, so a data CFT. So we've always talked about who's owning the data. So normally as a fires guy, I would go to my 255, I call them nerds, everybody's nerds. Hey, boss wants this, I need this for my targeting priorities. He goes like, hey, I don't know your systems. So it brings me back to the 8th ATADs or the JDocs or the new systems to say, okay, hey, you can pull this out of the 8th ATADs, but I find myself doing 95% of the work then. So the question I have now is, what are your thoughts on the Army developing a data CFT to help us understand what data that we need as targeteers, understanding what data the SEMA need, so we can actually help shape that picture for that commander's informed decision?
So right now, the Army, as part of the Army software factory of the different cohorts as they propagate back out to the field, they're creating the Army data teams at the core level, and then also that would eventually go down to the division level as well. So some are tracking in here the creation of the 28 series. MOS is coming out of the software factory. It's a whole new Warrant Officer series that will be that, like software development, and also it will be part of those data operation teams that are out there. So the Army is looking forward to that. So it's not really a data cross-functional team like in the AFC sense or T2COM eventually kind of sense. It's more they are being sent out to the operational and tactical force. Okay. Yeah, man.
I just had a quick question about data. So right now, brigade and division staffs normally struggle to do the standard staff processes with the limited data they already have available. So how do you foresee them being able to process even more data and be able to do those staff processes that they currently struggle with?
So I'll just add this and offer that. Yes, we're talking about a lot of data, but at the end of the day, what is the specific data requirements that are needed to make those decisions, right? So that's one of the things that we got to look at is tuning and making sure that we are minimizing the data and normalizing it to what it is, the minimal requirements to make those decisions. If not, we're just exhausting both analysts and decision makers by providing data that's not required. And we're flooding the bandwidth and the transport layer, trying to get this data from point A to point B, where it's going to be then transformed and just carved out and discarded anyways. So as we move and make sure that we identify, and I think that's the importance of having a data champion and a domain knowledge for each of the data stewards, if you will, when it comes to data operations, because those champions need to identify what are those minimum requirements versus, hey, send it all, and then we'll figure out what to do with the data once it gets there. But
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think from the EW perspective, one thing we're starting to realize, or we kind of already realize, is as we put multiple sensors out across the battlefield, we're going to be pushing back a lot of information, a lot of data. Stay on the word, right? So one thing we know is going to happen is cognitive overload for the operative, let's say EW PMT. So what do we have to introduce to help them out? That's where the AI ML stuff is going to come into, the large language models, be able to kind of classify some of the signal stuff that we have coming in and help out or reduce that cognitive load on the individual. One thing that you hear if you talk to the folks that are doing Next Gen C2 as well, they're discussing also AI ML on Next Gen C2 somewhere in the platform. I don't necessarily know if it's on the let me get my notes real quick to make sure I'm not speaking on turn. In the buckets, because the different buckets, they have application, data, transport, and infrastructure. It won't be specifically in one of those. It'll be across all 4 buckets, from my understanding. So it'll be able to help not just like an EW guy who, like our EWPMT app may sit on the application layer. That large language model, we should be able to utilize some of that compute as well. Over.
Yeah, I think you're foreshadowing KSA that we may have overlooked a little bit, and that's understanding AI ML modeling and how to validate a model. If we look at, I think of like maybe 2 years, 3 years ago, there was a news article came out. Some guy's like, hey, the Google AI is sentient. And I think I heard like multiple news agencies laughing it off, going, oh, that's not possible. And now there's like, full conversations happening with AI. So from that perspective, the speed and pace that AI is taking place looks really, really applicable to the data problem set that we're having. If we have the people in there that are training the AI models appropriately, identifying what's important, what's not important, we should be able to take off some of the load off of the decision makers and the analytic folks and focus on what's important. Again, targeting, force protection type stuff, make sure we have the capabilities in place to get after things. And, it's not sometime in the future, 2050, it's probably within the next couple of years, we'll see things in place that are going to be super helpful. And that's just me speculating. I don't know for sure, but based on the pace that we're seeing things right now, it seems like a realistic projection.
Okay, I think we got time for just one quick one, Bill.
Well, we already talked about it, but I want to. Earlier, you guys have mentioned, hey, do we need the data MOS or do we need an actual data work role that kind of per warfighting function? Now, we just mentioned the 28 or 280 MOS. Do we see that MOS as filling that gap for us? Will they be able to go out as we're training them across MOSs? What do you think that MOS is going to be able to fill this data MOS / data work role across the Army?
So I don't have the exact answer, but it kind of harkens back to what I mentioned before. It depends, right? So again, I think from a 28, 280 perspective, that big data architecture is probably like where they kind of reside. And then if you need very specific ORSA type functions to happen, that's where I would probably lean on them. Like, hey, I need to have this composition piece done. But whenever it comes down to like specifics, as a former 352 Sierra, I don't think a 280 wants to get into the things that I was doing as far as the type of stuff I was handling and why I was doing those things. As an EW guy, same thing. As a cyber guy, same idea. So having specializations within our specific MOSs that is supported and complemented by the 280, I think that's the right way to go.
Bill, as you know, we identified a gap a long time ago, right? And we had to create data engineer work roles within the cyber branch because of that, right? At the end of the day, our individuals have a domain knowledge. They understand the fields that are required to make those decisions. Can there be a data warrant that is just a logistician of data, if you will, moving it from point A to point B at the enterprise or transport level? At some point, I still think you need data champions and domain knowledge specialization to get after the true requirements for each of the warfighting functions and the domains. So.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be shared. Let's be honest. It's like those guys are filling a role and a gap that the Army has today, but there's still going to be an upskilling across all different MOSs that are out there to still have that collaboration.
All right, gentlemen, I absolutely appreciate it. Here's a chance for any last parting thoughts or comments from y'all.
Just one, the future is now.
I just like to thank everybody for putting up with me and my communication and being a part of this topic and listening to us ramble on about data. The Army's moving in a big direction, and we just need to be a part of it.
To me, the biggest thing is if you look at the panel up here, right, we got signalers, we got cyber, we got former MI individuals all working together. We just got to continue to evolve and work together to get after the challenges that affects all of us. But thank you.
Okay. Oh. Oh. They're leaving, man. You can talk though.
Hey, one second. We wanna take an opportunity real quick. If everybody could take seats real quick. It's real quick. We got no more than 2 minutes. I'm Chief Roman, and this is Chief Backus. I'm Chief Roman, and I'm the senior advisor for the Army National Guard, and I have Chief Greg Backus with me. And I'd like to take this opportunity to present some awards that we like to give to some of the professionals that have been working with us along with the compos. And it's very needed that all compos work together. And from the Army National Guard's perspective, we want to reward these guys because of them, they made our lives easier, and also for the traditional soldier at the state level that has to deal with whatever comes their way, for us at this level to make it easier for them. But I'd like to ask Francisco. He's Compo 3, Chief Francisco, if you come up forward. Also, Chief Dave Lucy and Chief Westbrook, if you could come up real quick. We'd like to thank them for they're always willing to help the National Guard. And go ahead.
So just real quick, from my perspective, from the Guard side of the house, these gentlemen have been tremendous. They're heavy hitters and helping us out as a Guard side. A lot of times we hear things last, we get equipment last, we're the last to know. And so having these folks out and actually coming and speaking to the Guard side and making sure that we're kind of included in the conversations is one of the most key things. Because I'm telling you right now, half the time conversations are had at the active duty component that don't work for the Guard. So we have to have these people, and they've been tremendous in assisting us. So what we have is we have for Chief Francisco, this is Battle of Cowpens. So we have some Guard heritage paintings. So thank you, Chief.
Cool. Thank you.
And then, is 20th Maine. I appreciate it. And then.
And I already got one last year.
Yeah, so he's got his goodies, but so one thing I want to tell about Chief Westbrook, just real quick, is last minute, no matter what you have, we were at a lunch, and hey, I know that we have our Indiana partners that need some assistance, and they want a brief. Do you have a second? He's like, sure, let's do it. So he gets on, fires up his laptop, pulls up a brief, and does an Army 2030 presentation to a Guard asset at the drop of a hat. So
I was on leave too.
And yeah, on leave. So I'm telling you, these gents have been tremendous. They're awesome. We appreciate the relationships, but I'll try to. This isn't a pink pair of goodies in here, but they are some custom made laser etched goodies with the Eagle Rising and CW5 on there, some goodies. So
Sweet.
yeah. So thank you, gents.
Thank you very much.
Please. Thank you. And lastly, we have some awesome stuff for Chief Roman. But my commander, who's sitting back there in a t-shirt, his bags, the poor guy's been traveling for 2 days and no bags. So anyway, Chief Roman, thank you. We got some goodies for you as well, but we'll get that at your retirement.